We are now just days away from Samsung announcing the Galaxy Z Fold 7, as well as the Flip 7 and the Galaxy Watch 8 series. That'll happen at Unpacked on July 9th. And with that said, let's take a look at the final rumors for the new Samsung Galaxy Z Fold 7. So starting off with the design, the biggest change that we're going to notice here is that the phone is a lot thinner this year. Rumors are pointing to it being about 4.2 millimeters to 4.5 millimeters unfolded, with about 8.9 to 9 millimeters when folded. Now, those numbers don't exactly match up, and that's because Samsung and a lot of other companies as well, they don't measure that plastic bezel that is around the display when measuring how thin it is unfolded. And Samsung does have a typically larger plastic bezel there around the display, which keeps the display from touching either side while it is folded, protecting that display, which is especially important because that's the most expensive part of a foldable phone and very expensive to get replaced. Now with that design, Samsung has also made a few other choices here where the under display camera is now gone. So we're going back to a hole punch on the main display there. It's still going to be 4 megapixels, so it's still not going to be that great, but it should be better than we had before, because before it was just basically a potato camera where it wasn't useful. You probably really only used it for facial recognition. Now, internally, we're looking at the Snapdragon 8 Elite for Galaxy, which debuted earlier this year on the Galaxy S25 series. This is an overclocked version of the Snapdragon 8 Elite. I think it clocks in at about 4.47 gigahertz, which is up from like 4.32 gigahertz, I believe is what on every other Snapdragon 8 Elite device. So they're a tiny bit faster, but you probably won't notice a difference unless you're using benchmarks. Now that'll come with 12 gigabytes of RAM as well as 256 gigabytes of storage, up to 1 terabyte storage options. Battery capacity is also expected to remain the same, which is actually pretty impressive considering how much thinner the Galaxy Z Fold 7 is this year. It's about 1.5 millimeters thinner unfolded and about 3 millimeters thinner when folded. So to still see a 4400 milliamp hour battery in there is pretty impressive, though we still would like to see Samsung switch to silicon carbon. That's what Oppo and a lot of the other Chinese smartphone makers are using these days to put in such large batteries into these phones, like the Oppo Find N5, which has a 5600 milliamp hour battery, and it's going to measure in at about the exact same dimensions as the Galaxy Z Fold 7. Charging speeds are going to remain the same at 25 watts wired and 15 watts wireless. That means you'll probably be able to get a full charge in about 70 or 80 minutes, which is quite slow, but keep in mind that Samsung is one of the only ones doing these kind of speeds on USB-C PD. So while we have OnePlus and Oppo doing 80 watts, 100 watts charging on their phones, that's over USB-A, which means you got to carry their charging brick with you if you want to get those fast charging speeds. Whereas Samsung is doing this all over USB-C PD, so you can use pretty much any USB-C PD brick you want to get these charging speeds. And when you use USB-C PD on Oppo and OnePlus devices, it's typically under about 15 watts. So Samsung is still doing quite well here, even though it's pretty clear that they're still reeling from the Galaxy Note 7 debacle almost a decade ago now. Now, those cameras are also getting a pretty significant upgrade. Well, one camera is getting a pretty significant upgrade, and that's going to be the primary camera, which will jump to 200 megapixels this year. The ultra wide will still get 12 megapixels, and the 3x telephoto will stick to 10 megapixels. Now, while this is unfortunate because the cameras have been neglected for a few years from Samsung, they do typically only upgrade one camera sensor per year. We've seen this on the Galaxy S series, where they'll upgrade one camera each year. This year was the ultra wide, and next year we expect the 3x camera to get upgraded, or possibly even replaced, because you should be able to sensor crop that 200 megapixel primary sensor to get 3x and even up to 5x. And another first for Samsung this year is that the Galaxy Z Fold 7 will launch with Android 16 and One UI 8. Now, One UI 8 has already been in beta. I think they released the third beta today, actually, for the Galaxy S25 series. But this will be the first time that Samsung has launched a new version of One UI and Android on the Foldable. Typically, it launches on the Galaxy S series because Android typically comes out around September, October after Samsung's launches have all taken place. But this year, Google has moved up quite a bit the release date of Android, where it actually happened earlier this month. So we should be able to see Android 16 right away. Android 15 was such a long wait. It's great to see Android 16 come in pretty soon for Samsung. Now let's talk about that pricing. That's the big elephant in the room. We've seen a lot of leaks coming out of mostly Europe, where carriers and retailers have already started their listings for the Galaxy Z Fold 7. And they have placeholder pricing, which means that it's not accurate. We see this pretty much every year, and people always fall for these rumors. And these placeholders are showing that it's going to be about 2, 3, 400 euros more than it was last year. We don't expect that to happen. Maybe in the US, because of the tariffs, there's going to be really the first real launch after tariffs have been put in place. This is the first one where devices weren't already in the US before the announcement, which means they are likely going to be affected by these tariffs. We are still expecting it to stick to about $18.99, but tariffs, of course, can play a role in that. Hopefully it'll be able to stay under 2,000, because I think if it goes over 2,000, it's going to be really hard to sell the Galaxy Z Fold 7. But we'll have to wait and see. Of course, we'll know a lot more about the Galaxy Z Fold 7 on July 9th when Samsung officially unveils it on stage at Unpacked. Now, you can keep it tuned here to Android Headlines on YouTube, as well as AndroidHeadlines.com, to get the latest on the Galaxy Z Fold 7 and all of the rest of Samsung's devices, as we will be at Unpacked next week.